The smell of disinfectant is something you don't forget. It clings to your clothes, your skin, your memory. Even after they discharged me, I could still smell it on my hands, that sterile mix of alcohol and plastic and fear. Triple bypass. March 2nd, 2023. That's what they called it. A routine procedure, according to the surgeon. "You'll be back on your feet in no time, Mr. Harlan," he said. He was half right. I got back on my feet, but I was never the same. When you wake up in a hospital bed with tubes in your arms, you realize how fragile you've become. Everything around you beeps and blinks, the monitors, the phone machine, the call button, that no one answers quickly enough. You hear strangers talking about you in third person. He's stable. He needs rest. As if you're already gone, and they're just discussing the aftermath. The first familiar face I saw after surgery was my son, Michael, 38 years old, dressed in that same Navy suit he wears to every business meeting. I used to joke that he was born wearing a tie. Now the joke doesn't land anymore. "Hey, Dad." His voice was calm, too calm, like he was talking to a client who might back out of a deal. "Hey, Mike," I said, my throat dry as paper. "You look busy." He smiled, the polite kind of smile you give a stranger on a plane. "Just came from the office. I wanted to check on you before heading back. How are you feeling?" Like someone opened my chest and borrowed a few parts. He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, the doctor said the operation went great. You'll need a few weeks to recover, though. No stress, no heavy lifting. You'll have to slow down." I looked at the clock on the wall. 10:14 a.m. visiting hours just started. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at it immediately. Reflex. "Yeah," I murmured, slowing down sound nice. Then, like a man who's been waiting for the right moment to pitch a deal, he cleared his throat. "Dad, about the business. I've been thinking. Here it comes. You've done more than enough all these years. But maybe it's time for you to really rest. Let me handle everything at Harlan Construction. Payroll, contracts, property management, all of it." "You already do," I said, trying to smile. "Not officially. The board still has you listed as majority owner. It complicates things. Clients keep calling you instead of me. That's because they trust me." His lips tightened. "Right. But you're recovering from major surgery. You don't need that stress anymore. I can take care of things." I stared at him, trying to recognize the boy I once carried on my shoulders through lumber yards, teaching him the smell of fresh-cut cedar, the difference between drywall dust and concrete. He used to ask 100 questions. "How much does a beam like that cost, Dad? What's rebar for?" He learned fast. Too fast. Now his tone was different. Clean. Professional. Detached. "What are you asking, Mike?" He took out a folder from his briefcase, slim, black leather, expensive. "Just paperwork to make things simpler. The company's already under my management. But this would make it official. You'd still get monthly distributions, of course. I'd keep you updated." I felt the world narrow into a thin white tunnel of light and sound. Beeping. Footsteps in the hallway. The faint whir of an oxygen machine. He wanted it all. "I just got out of surgery, Mike," I said quietly. "Maybe not the best time for signatures." He leaned back unfazed. "I'm only bringing it up because the lawyers need your confirmation soon. It's just business, Dad. You've done your part." "My part? Rest," he added. "Enjoy yourself. You're not. Well, you don't have to be useful anymore." It was a small sentence, but it hit harder than the scalpel ever did. I didn't answer. The nurse came in to check my vitals, and Michael took that as his cue to leave. "We'll talk later," he said, tapping his phone. "I've got a meeting downtown. Take care, all right?" He left the room before I could respond. When the door closed, I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles. Each one identical, sterile, replaceable. Just like people, apparently. For years I built homes, bridges, warehouses. I poured concrete with my own hands, calculated every beam, every cost down to the cent. I was useful, needed, necessary. Now my own son had declared me obsolete. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was living in the house I'd built with those same hands, running the company that bore my name, spending from accounts I'd filled. And I was lying here counting heartbeats. A nurse walked in and asked, "How are you feeling, Mr. Harlan?" I almost said useless, but instead I just smiled and said, "Better, much better." Because something inside me, something that had been asleep for years, had just woken up, and I knew this recovery would not end with therapy or pills. It would end with balance. Recovery is a strange kind of prison. You wake up every day in the same chair, drink the same soup, stare at the same clock. The seconds feel heavy, like weights tied to your thoughts. After the hospital, I moved into Michael's house, just until I was strong enough to manage on my own, as he put it. That was his way of making sure I didn't make any decisions without his supervision. Their house looked like a showroom. Marble countertops, chrome appliances, gray everything. Like someone had taken a picture from a magazine and told the builders to copy it exactly. Personality optional. Sabrina, his wife, called it minimalist luxury. I called it sterile. They gave me the guest room downstairs. It was clean cold and smelled faintly of detergent. On the nightstand sat a framed photo of their children. Not of me, not of anyone I'd ever loved. For the first few days, they treated me kindly enough. Sabrina would leave a smoothie outside my door, bright green and bitter. Michael would ask if I needed help with tech stuff. My phone, my bank app, my passwords. At first I thought he was being considerate. I didn't realize he was taking inventory. One morning, about a week after I moved in, he came into my room with a folder under his arm and that same corporate tone he used in the hospital. "Morning, Dad. How are you feeling?" "I'm stronger every day," I said, folding the newspaper. "That's great. Really great. Listen, there's a few things we should get out of the way while you're here and rested." He set the folder down like a waiter serving bad news. "It's nothing complicated, mostly signatures. The lawyers need to finalize some updates for the company. Just keeping things clean in case the board asks questions. You'll still have your monthly income, obviously." "Updates?" I asked. He smiled thinly. "Just formalizing what's already true, that I'm running operations now. You're technically still listed as majority owner, and that creates confusion with contracts. Legal wants everything under one signature. Yours. Well, sure, but it's just for convenience." He opened the folder. Inside were 4 documents, each with neat rows of small print and my name printed across the top. One for Harlan Construction LLC, another for a property trust, and 2 for my personal investment accounts. The last page showed my house on Riverview Lane, appraised at $480,000. My name was there too. Under it, a blank space waiting for my signature. I felt my pulse throb in my healing chest. "This looks like a full transfer, Michael." He waved it off. "Temporary. You're still recovering. I'll handle the paperwork, taxes, payroll. Once you're back on your feet, we can shift it back." I looked at him. My son, the boy who once begged me for quarters to buy soda after soccer practice. The man who now spoke to me like a client too stubborn to see reason. "What if I say no?" I asked quietly. He didn't even blink. "Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You've worked all your life. It's time to relax. Let me deal with the stress." I wanted to tell him I was the stress, that I'd built every beam and wall of that company with my hands, with sweat that had never been delegated. But he looked at me like I was a child refusing medicine. He slid the pen toward me. "You trust me, don't you?" It was the same phrase he'd used when he was 12, standing in our garage, holding the circular saw, without permission. "Trust me, Dad. I know what I'm doing." He didn't then, and he didn't now. But I was tired, physically, mentally, spiritually. The anesthesia might have left my body, but not my head. The world still felt hazy, soft around the edges. So I signed. Just like that, I gave away the house I built, the company I founded, and the security I'd spent a lifetime earning. He patted my shoulder. You did the right thing, Dad. Now you can focus on healing. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in that house reminded me of what I'd lost. The hum of the refrigerator that wasn't mine, the footsteps upstairs, the faint laughter of a family that didn't include me anymore. But here's the part they never remembered. It wasn't truly their house at all. Years ago, I'd put their house into a family trust one controlled and let them live there. Michael always called it their home, but title said otherwise. I'd done it to protect them, to make sure the property stayed in the family no matter what happened. It seemed generous at the time. Now it felt like the single smartest thing I'd ever done. In the morning, Sabrina was in the kitchen slicing avocados with surgical precision. "Morning, Mr. H," she said, without looking up. "Michael said the papers are done. You must feel relieved." "Relieved," I echoed. She poured herself coffee from a machine that looked more complex than my old truck engine. "You'll love retirement. You can finally take it easy. You deserve it." "Retirement? Well, isn't that the plan? Michael said you don't have to worry about work anymore. It's better that way." I wanted to ask, better for who? But she was already walking away, coffee in hand, humming. Later that day, I went to my old office to pick up a few things. The receptionist looked surprised to see me. "Mr. Harlan, I thought you'd retired." Retired? The word had already made the rounds. My desk was gone. My name had been scraped off the glass door. In its place, Michael Harlan, CEO. The secretary gave me a box with a few of my things, an old calculator, a framed photo of the first house I ever built, and my mug with the chipped handle. I drove back to Michael's place in silence. Or rather, I sat in the passenger seat while he drove. "It's for the best," he said as we passed the downtown skyline. "You don't need to stress about deadlines anymore." I looked out the window at the buildings I had helped erect. The steel, the concrete, the glass. Each one carried a piece of me, literal and figurative. And now, apparently, I didn't own a single brick of it. That night, lying in bed, I tried to count the reasons why I shouldn't have signed. I ran out of fingers. When you spend decades building something, you don't imagine your own blood will take it from you. You imagine they'll inherit it someday, yes, but not while you're still breathing. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, the smell of detergent thick in the air, and somewhere in that sleepless night, a quiet promise formed. If he wanted everything, he'd get it, but not the way he thought. Because a man who builds for a living never forgets how to tear things down. The weeks that followed were quieter than any I'd ever lived through. Not peaceful quiet. The kind that comes after hard work when your bones ache and you feel you've earned your rest. No, this was the sterile quiet of being unnecessary. I was a ghost in my son's house. Every morning I'd sit by the window in the guest room and watch Michael leave for work in my old truck. The one I bought new in 2014 with company money, back when it was still my company. I'd hear the garage door open, the engine start, and that would be the last sound of life in the house until evening. Sabrina worked from home, if you could call it that. She spent her days video calling friends, ordering things online, taking long baths that drained the hot water tank. At lunch, microwave something green and call it lunch. Occasionally, she'd remind me politely that the fridge was for everyone, as if I were some boarder forgetting to pay rent. One afternoon, I made myself coffee. Real coffee, not the bitter plant water she liked. She came downstairs, took one look at the mug, and frowned. "Oh, caffeine, Mr. Harlan? Michael said you shouldn't be drinking that after your surgery." I smiled. Michael said a lot of things. She didn't answer, just left the room with a soft shake of her head, the scent of her perfume lingering like disapproval. By mid-April, I was feeling stronger. The doctor said my recovery was remarkable for my age. But strength is one thing. Freedom is another. Every time I mentioned driving again, Michael's tone hardened. "Dad, let's not do this. You've had Major heart surgery. You shouldn't be behind the wheel. I've been driving since before you were born. And that's exactly the problem. You're not 25 anymore. You can Uber if you need to go somewhere. Uber. That was his solution for everything. Order it, outsource it, automate it. He'd turned life into an app. One Saturday evening, Sabrina hosted one of her dinner parties. The house filled with people I didn't know, friends from her wellness circle. All expensive smiles and wine-stained lips. The dining table gleamed under soft white light. Every plate identical. Every napkin folded into a perfect triangle. I was seated at the far end, like an afterthought, next to the pantry door. They talked about investments, new cars, some Mediterranean cruise they were planning. I tried to follow, but each sentence was like listening to a foreign language I used to know. Then halfway through dessert, one of the guests, a tall man with 2 white teeth, asked Michael, "So, you're running Harlan Construction now, right? Must feel good taking over the family legacy." Michael laughed, modestly, but I caught the pride in it. Well, someone had to step up. Dad's been through a lot health-wise. He's enjoying retirement now, aren't you, Dad? The table turned toward me. I could feel their eyes studying the old man at the corner. I forced a small smile. Retirement wasn't really my plan. Sabrina giggled, tilting her glass. He says that, but he loves not having to deal with stress anymore. We've made sure he's taken care of. Taken care of, like a houseplant. Someone changed the subject, but I stopped listening. I kept hearing that word echo in my mind, retirement. A polite term for disposal. After dessert, while the others lingered in the living room, I slipped out onto the back porch. The night air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. The garden lights flickered, casting thin shadows across the patio I'd helped pour last summer. Michael came out a few minutes later, phone still in hand. "There you are. You okay? Just needed some air." He nodded, glancing back toward the dining room. "You did great tonight. Everyone loves hearing about the old days." "I wasn't telling stories," I said quietly. "I was remembering my life." He frowned. "Dad, don't start. We've been over this. You're supposed to be relaxing. I don't want you stressing about business." "I'm not stressed about business. I'm thinking about legacy." "What's that supposed to mean?" I turned to face him. "It means that you're running a company with my name on the door. It means that when people ask about Harlan Construction, they're not talking about you. They're talking about the man who built it." His jaw tightened. "Dad, come on. Don't make this emotional. You know I've earned my place." Earned. The word came out sharper than I intended. You think inheriting what I built makes you capable? You think cutting corners, laying off people I trusted, makes you smarter? He stepped closer, his expression suddenly colder. "This isn't about you anymore. It's about progress. You can't build a future by living in the past. And you can't build a soul by stealing someone else's work." The silence between us stretched. Then he said it, the line that sealed everything. "You're not useful anymore, Dad. You should be grateful you can relax now. Most people your age don't get that luxury." Grateful, useful, luxury. 3 words, each one like a nail hammered into what was left of my dignity. He went back inside. I stood there in the dark, the laughter from the house echoing behind me, the hum of my own pulse loud in my ears. When the guests finally left, I sat alone in the kitchen. Empty glasses on the counter, crumbs on the tablecloth, the faint smell of wine and expensive candles. On the fridge door hung a magnet with my granddaughter's drawing, a house with a red roof, stick figures holding hands. Under it, in shaky crayon letters, Grandpa's house. I stared at it for a long time. Then I realized what made me angriest wasn't what Michael had taken. It was how easily I'd let him do it. I thought about all those years we worked side by side, teaching him the ropes, the books, the bidding process, showing him how to deal with clients, how to treat workers with respect. I thought about the night his mother died, how he'd promised he'd always take care of me. He was 16 then, crying like a child. I'd believed him. Now, decades later, I sat in a kitchen that wasn't mine, in a house bought with my money, feeling like a guest overstaying his welcome. Around midnight, I got up and poured myself a glass of water. The cold hit my teeth and woke something inside me. Not rage, not grief, but clarity. I walked back to my room, opened the drawer of my nightstand, and pulled out the old black notebook I'd kept since my contracting days. Every job, every expense, every client, every clause, recorded in neat handwriting. At the back were copies of documents I'd kept just in case. I flipped through them slowly. Articles of incorporation, partnership agreements, tax IDs, even an addendum I'd written in 1998. And there it was, plain as day. In the event of fraudulent transfer, ownership shall revert to the original founder. I stared at that sentence until my eyes blurred. Then I smiled. The first real smile in months. Michael thought I was obsolete, but he'd forgotten one thing. I wrote the rules, and I never stopped knowing how to read the fine print. The next morning I woke before dawn. The house was still. Even the refrigerator hum seemed cautious, as if afraid to break the quiet. Old habits never die. When I ran the company, I used to get up at 5:30, make black coffee, and check invoices before the crews even loaded their trucks. Now I sat at the same hour in a stranger's kitchen, the digital clock glowing 5:32 a.m., a cup of instant coffee steaming in my hands. I opened my black notebook again and read through the documents I'd found the night before. The ink had faded slightly, but my handwriting, tight, methodical, was still clear. At the bottom of page 47 was a clause I'd written myself all those years ago. In the event of any unauthorized or fraudulent transfer of ownership, the founder retains right of reversion to all company assets, including property and fiduciary holdings. Michael hadn't read that part, or if he had, he didn't understand it. He never did like the fine print. By 7, Sabrina came down in her silk robe. "You're up early," she said, yawning. "Old men and habits," I replied, smiling faintly. She gave a half laugh, already scrolling through her phone. "Michael's got a busy day. The firm's presenting to the investors this morning. Big deal." I nodded. "He'll meet it." When she left, I went back to my room, changed into a press shirt, and dialed a number I hadn't used in nearly a decade. It rang twice. Evelyn Torres speaking. The voice was warm, familiar. My old accountant. She'd been with me through 2 recessions, 3 expansions, and more tax seasons than either of us cared to count. "Evelyn, it's George Harlan." There was a pause. "George? Good Lord. I haven't heard that name in years. How are you?" "Recovering," I said, "from surgery and from stupidity." She laughed softly. "That bad, huh?" "Worse. I need your help, Evelyn, and I need you to be discreet." She didn't ask for details right away. That was one of the things I'd always admired about her. "When can you come in?" "I can be there in an hour." "Bring whatever you've got." Evelyn's office hadn't changed much. Same gray filing cabinets, same scent of toner and stale coffee. She looked older, sure, we both did, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. She poured me coffee and listened as I explained everything. The surgery, the signatures, the transfer. I showed her the trust documents, the property deed, the company shares, all signed over in a single afternoon when I was still doped up on hospital painkillers. When I finished, she exhaled through her nose. "Jesus, George, he really took everything." "Everything I let him take," I corrected. She adjusted her glasses, flipping through the papers. "The problem is, these signatures are valid. Unless we can prove coercion or incapacity, they'll hold." "I know," I said, "but there's another way." I slid my notebook across the table. She read the clause carefully, her eyebrows rising. "You kept this." "I wrote it." Smart man. "It was meant to protect the company from outsiders. Never thought I'd need it against my own blood." She leaned back, So if we can prove he transferred assets under false pretenses, you can invoke this clause. Exactly. The question is, how much did he move and where? Evelyn opened her laptop, tapping away. Give me a minute. I watched her work, efficient, calm. The way I used to be when numbers still meant something pure. 10 minutes later, she turned the screen toward me. There's been activity in your accounts. Transfers totaling $218,000 over the past month. All routed to a subsidiary under Michael's name. He's been bleeding you dry. I stared at the figures. $218,000. Enough to buy a house or retire comfortably. Money I'd saved for years, gone in silence. Can we trace it? Already did, she said. The transactions list Harlan Construction as the source. But since he signed as power of attorney, the bank won't question it. However, she tapped another document. That clause of yours gives you an opening. Fraudulent intent, self-dealing, misrepresentation. If we file with the state registrar, we can freeze everything until the dispute is resolved. I looked at her. You'd help me do that? She smiled, the kind of smile people give when they're about to do something righteous. You built half this town, George. I figure you've earned a little justice. That night, I sat in the small park across from Michael's house, notebook in hand, watching the lights in the windows. Through the living room curtains, I could see him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing like a man giving orders to the world. I wondered if he'd even noticed what he'd taken from me beyond the money, the purpose, the pride, the simple satisfaction of being the one who provided. Maybe not. Maybe that was the tragedy. He didn't steal because he needed, but because he could. 2 days later, I met Evelyn again. She handed me a neat folder with new documents. I've filed the claim with the Secretary of State's office, she said. You're reinstated as managing trustee pending review. The assets are frozen. Frozen. Meaning he can't move a cent until this is settled. The bank, the property office, the company accounts, all locked down. He'll find out soon enough. How soon? She grinned. Probably by the time you get home. I thanked her and drove back. It was almost dusk when I pulled into the driveway. Michael's truck was parked sideways, engine still running. Through the front window, I saw him at the kitchen island, shouting into the phone. Sabrina stood beside him, pale and tight-lipped. I walked in quietly. He turned the moment he saw me. Dad, what the hell did you do? Good evening to you too, son. You froze my accounts. Do you have any idea what this does to my credit? The contracts, the payroll. Correction, I said. My contracts, my payroll. He slammed his fist on the counter. You can't just undo everything. I didn't, I replied calmly. The state did. On my request. Turns out, you didn't read the company bylaws as well as you thought. His face flushed red. This is ridiculous. I was trying to help you. Help me? I let out a short laugh. By emptying my accounts? By selling my house out from under me? That's a hell of a favor, Michael. Sabrina tried to speak, but he cut her off, pacing like a trapped animal. You don't understand how business works anymore, Dad. Things have changed. No, son, I said softly. You've changed. He stopped pacing. For a moment, I thought I saw something. Guilt, fear, maybe even regret. But it vanished as quickly as it came. You can't win this, he said finally. I already have. I left him standing there, surrounded by everything he'd thought was his. Outside, the air felt lighter, sharper. The kind of air that wakes you up after too long a sleep. I hadn't just taken back what was mine. I'd taken back myself. But I wasn't done yet. Because there's one thing I've learned after 50 years in construction. You can't rebuild until you've cleared all the rot. And there was still plenty left to tear down. The call came the next morning. I was sitting at the small wooden table in the breakfast nook, the same place where I used to help Michael with his math homework 25 years ago. The sunlight streamed through the blinds in thin, tired lines. I just poured myself a cup of coffee when the phone rang. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Dad. His voice was low, tense. The kind of voice a man uses when he's trying to sound in control, but the floor is slipping under him. Yes, Michael. We need to talk. I think we already did. I'm not joking. Neither am I. There was a long silence. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth. Meet me at the office, he said finally. Now, when I arrived, the building looked smaller than I remembered. It used to feel enormous, 2 stories of brick and glass, with the company name shining proudly on the facade. Harlan Construction. I'd picked those letters myself, had them cut from solid steel. They were supposed to last a century. Now the front lobby had been remodeled, modern art on the walls, pale wood panels, sterile gray furniture. A receptionist I didn't recognize looked up with a rehearsed smile. Can I help you? She asked. George Harlan? I said. I built this place. Her smile faltered. Oh, Mr. Harlan. Of course. He's expecting you. She led me down the hall. I noticed details I'd never allowed when I was in charge. Flashy monitors, glass partitions, the smell of artificial citrus from some overpriced cleaning spray. Everything slick, soulless, efficient. When we reached his office, the nameplate on the door still read Michael Harlan, CEO. I paused before stepping in. He was standing behind my old desk, phone pressed to his ear, waving for me to sit. He didn't even look up until the call ended. Dad, he said curtly, tossing the phone down. Do you realize what you've done? I sat slowly, corrected a mistake. He glared. You froze every company account. I can't pay vendors, employees, or suppliers. Do you know how bad that looks? I sipped my coffee. I'd brought it with me. The thermos scratched and dented from years of job sites. Bad for who? For me. For us. The company's reputation. The company's reputation, I interrupted, was built on honesty, not theft. On hard work, not manipulation. The kind of work you've never had dirt under your nails to understand. He slammed his palm on the desk. The sound echoed off the glass walls. You think this is about dirt? You think this is about pride? This is business, Dad. You're living in the past. I leaned forward, calm, almost whispering. Business doesn't excuse betrayal. He opened his mouth to retort, but I cut him off. I know about the transfers, I said. The $218,000 for my pension. The fraudulent trust documents. The contracts you redirected to your own shell company. I know everything. The color drained from his face. Who told you? Does it matter? For the first time in years, he looked small, like the boy who once broke my window throwing a baseball, terrified of the truth. You can't prove it, he muttered. I can, and I already have. Evelyn filed everything with the state auditor's office and the attorney general yesterday. Fraudulent misrepresentation, financial elder abuse, embezzlement. Take your pick. He stumbled back, shaking his head. You wouldn't. I would, I said, standing. And I did. The office door opened behind me. The receptionist looked nervous. Behind her was a man in a dark suit, tall, calm, carrying a leather briefcase. Mr. Michael Harlan, the man said, flashing a badge. I'm with the Attorney General's Financial Crimes Division. We have a few questions about your recent filings. Michael froze. I'd suggest you cooperate, I said, moving past him. They can be unpleasant when lied to. He turned toward me, voice trembling. Dad, you can't just destroy everything we built. I turned back and smiled faintly. No, son, I built it. You just try to sell it. The agent stepped forward, speaking in low tones. Michael argued, his voice rising, desperate. I walked out without looking back. Outside, the sky was overcast, thick gray clouds rolling in from the west. I stood by my truck again after the bank reinstated ownership and breathed in the cool air. It smelled like rain, metal, and freedom. Evelyn called as I was pulling out of the parking lot. It's done, she said. The injunction's final. All assets revert to your control pending investigation. The property, too. I nodded to myself. Thank you, Evelyn. Don't thank me, she said. Just don't do something stupid, like forgiving him too soon. I'm done forgiving, I said. When I got home, my own home now legally and otherwise, I poured a drink for the first time in years. Scotch, the good kind. I sat in my armchair by the window, the one that looked out over the lake, and watched the wind ripple the water. There's a strange calm that comes after justice. Not joy, exactly. Not even relief. Just balance, like a structure finally leveled after years of sagging. I thought of Michael, pacing some gray interrogation room, calling lawyers, blaming everyone but himself. Maybe someday he'd understand that I hadn't taken revenge. I'd just restored the foundation. A builder knows when something's rotten, you don't patch it. You tear it down and start again. The phone buzzed once more. A message from an unknown number. Dad, please. Let's talk. I made a mistake. I typed slowly, deliberately. You didn't make a mistake, Michael. You made a choice. Then I put the phone face down, finished my drink, and listened to the rain begin to fall against the window. Each drop steady, rhythmic, like nails being driven into new timber. It sounded like construction. It sounded like rebuilding. The rain stopped by morning. The sky had cleared into that pale, washed-out blue that only comes after a storm. Soft, quiet, humbling. I hadn't slept much, but I didn't feel tired. There's a strange kind of rest that follows destruction. The stillness that comes when everything that needed breaking is finally broken. I made breakfast for myself, 2 eggs, a slice of toast, and coffee brewed in my old dented percolator. The smell filled the kitchen like it used to when Margaret was alive. Back then, the mornings were noisy. Radio humming, her humming louder, sunlight catching the dust above the table. I used to think peace was silence. I was wrong. Peace is the sound of something honest. Around 9, my lawyer, Mr. Phelps, called. It's done, he said. The court accepted the revocation of transfer. All assets are officially back in your name. Property, business, pension accounts, everything. I exhaled slowly. Everything. Yes, sir. Including the house your son and daughter-in-law currently occupy. Do you want to proceed with eviction? I looked out the window toward the garden. The apple tree Margaret planted was heavy with fruit. She always said the first apples after a storm taste the sweetest. Yes, I said. Proceed. There was a pause. You're certain? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. 2 days later, a courier delivered the official notice. Pale yellow envelope, bold black letters. I didn't seal it with triumph, only with truth. When I signed the papers, my hand didn't even shake. That evening, I drove to the address. Their house now, though not for long. My tires crunched over the familiar gravel driveway. The lawn was manicured, the porch lights warm. I could see movement through the curtains. Sabrina pacing, phone pressed to her ear. I knocked once, twice. The door opened a few seconds later. Michael stood there. No-tie sleeves rolled up, eyes hollow from sleeplessness. Dad. His voice was almost a whisper. Please don't do this. Do what? I asked. Tell the truth. He stepped aside, letting me in. The living room looked untouched. Same perfect furniture. Same scent of lemon polish. Same emptiness. It was beautiful and lifeless, like a showroom pretending to be a home. Sabrina appeared in the hallway, arms folded. We have nowhere to go, she said quietly. You have plenty, I replied. You just spent it on the wrong things. Michael rubbed his temples. I know I screwed up, okay? I made bad choices. I was under pressure, contracts, investors. Everything moved too fast. I never meant to hurt you. You didn't hurt me, son, I said. You just showed me who you are. He looked at me like a man drowning, searching for something to hold. We can fix this. We can make new terms, new agreements. No, I interrupted softly. There's no rebuilding on rotten beams. I reached into my jacket and handed him the envelope. You'll need to vacate by the end of the month. The house belongs to me again. Sabrina's voice broke. "This is cruel." "No," I said. Cruel was making an old man sign away his life while he was full of morphine. Michael opened the envelope, scanned the papers, and sank onto the couch. For the first time since my surgery, I saw him without the armor. No arrogance, no bravado, just a man who'd mistaken greed for ambition. I almost pitied him. Almost. He looked up. "Where will you go?" I smiled faintly. "Home." Then I left him there, surrounded by everything he thought he owned. The next few weeks passed quietly. The company stabilized under my direction again. Evelyn returned as accountant. The old crews came back one by one, shaking my hand like I'd returned from the dead. We rebuilt what he'd nearly destroyed. I cut my salary in half and doubled the workers' pay. The way I saw it, money was only good if it bought you dignity. One afternoon, I stood in the yard behind my house, pruning the apple tree. The air smelled of sawdust and fruit. My hands, scarred, old, steady, still remembered the rhythm of cutting wood. I thought of Michael again. He'd moved out quietly, no confrontation, no apology. The house was listed for sale within a month. Someone told me he'd taken a consulting job in another state. Good. Distance might teach him what inheritance never did. A week later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address, but I knew the handwriting immediately. "Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve to ask for it. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For the company, for the house, for everything. You were right, I thought I was fixing things, but I was only fixing them for myself. I learned too late that you can't build anything honest on a lie. I hope someday I'll be the kind of man you wanted me to be. Michael." I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly and placed it inside the notebook where all my old contracts lived. Let the apology sit among the fine print. Maybe someday I'd believe it. That night, I sat on the porch, sipping tea as the sun dipped behind the lake. The water caught the orange light, rippling like hammered copper. Somewhere far away, thunder grumbled, not a storm, just the sound of weather remembering its power. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't angry, just even balanced. The company was mine again. The house was mine again. My life, mine and whole. And though my heart had been cut open, stitched, and scarred, it still beat with a steady rhythm. Stronger, slower, honest. As I sat there, a breeze rustled through the trees. The air smelled of wet earth and apple blossoms. I smiled, thinking how funny it was. Michael had said I wasn't useful anymore. But the truth was, I'd never stopped building. I was just working on something he couldn't see, the quiet architecture of consequence. I raised my cup slightly, like a toast, to the empty yard. To usefulness, I murmured, and to knowing when to rebuild. Then I took a sip, leaned back in my chair, and watched the last light fade from the water. I may be old, but the foundation still holds.